Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we figure out how to build and run a SaaS. I'm Brian, and Benedikt is out on vacation this week, so I was joined by a very special guest and one of my favorite people on the internet, Justin Jackson, and we had a great conversation, as you'll hear in just a little bit. We talked about market risks, we talked about concerns and opportunities and directions for Headlamp. It was a great conversation. I came away with a number of insights, takeaways, and action steps. So enjoy my conversation with Justin Jackson. Welcome to Slow and Steady, Justin Jackson.
Hey.
But something I really want to talk about is you've been pounding this drum for a little while about how important the market is. And there's a nuance I want to get into it a little bit because I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I also want to be sure that I'm not fooling myself in what I'm trying to do with Headlamp. Okay. Which is, I know for a fact, I know good and well that this is a market. I'm not trying to build something that somebody else has never proven. Okay. Employee engagement, employee satisfaction, happiness surveys, all that sort of stuff that has existed for forever. And every Fortune 100 company on the list is spending big money there. It's a market. Okay.
Can we pause right there? How do you know that? How do you know that people want employee engagement software?
Because from the years of 2006 to 2011, I did sales and marketing for a company in the employee recognition space.
Okay.
And we sold those programs to Fortune 100 companies. And I have friends who continue to work for those companies. And I've attended all the conferences.
Okay.
It's an established
this
industry.
Is a good sign. So you've sold this to companies before?
Yes.
Okay.
Different. Now let me qualify that.
Yeah.
It was a different offering at a different level of the market.
Okay. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
It was much more enterprise sales. The previous thing, like we're selling a host of solutions, part of which included consulting and anything that you would, the accounts were measured in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, not like $49 per month per manager. It was not a SaaS offering, no. But does the market exist? Do businesses at a certain level of maturity start to think about how do we keep our people happy and retain them for longer so that it doesn't cost us in hiring, loss of productivity, et cetera, et cetera? Yes, that exists.
And is Headlamp aimed at a certain size of company or a certain type of company?
My working hypothesis on that was, I think I need to go for founders at companies of, let's say, between 25 and 100 employees. Founders who care about culture, are thinking about their employees, but maybe don't have like a completely fleshed out HR department, or maybe a fledgling HR department.
And how do you know that founders at companies 25 to 100 people want employee engagement software?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not know that.
Okay. So you were previously selling to bigger companies.
Yep.
I mean, that would be the thing I would be worrying about, which is, so the whole idea about market, and the reason I'm so interested in it, is a market is just the sum of demand, right? It's how many people are in the market, how many of them are buying, at what frequency do they buy, and it's just evidence of demand. And so my biggest question for Headlamp, like if I was investing in companies, which I'm not, but if you came to me and you're like, okay, I want $100,000 or $1 million, I'd be like, okay, well, what proof do you have that people want this, that companies 25 to 100 people want this? And my experience is I was actually just on a call yesterday with somebody who also wants to target companies 25 to 100 employees. I don't know why that is. Different space. But I was like, I've never been a founder or manager of a company that big. I think the biggest company I've worked for was Quick Left when they acquired Sprintly, and I think they were 30 to 50 people maybe.
Okay.
But I don't know what metrics they're using to figure that stuff out, or how expensive it is if they lose somebody. That I've never been there. But if I was you, I would want to see some evidence that that group is already in motion in some way, that they are demonstrating their demand through Google searches, through buying other products that are similar for that type of market,
Mm-hmm.
through even if you were talking to them and you're in a interview situation or something, customer interview, and I know you're really good at these, but to add on a little bit of like, how are you solving this problem currently? Well, actually, let's stop there. When you ask
Yeah.
that question, what do they say?
Yep. So some people say know your team.
Okay.
You familiar with them?
Yeah.
Yep. So great. It's a great product. And seems like targeted toward the size and type of company I'm interested in, but they either say uh, know your team, spreadsheets, and Google Docs.
Okay.
And I think a couple of folks I've talked to have mentioned Office Vibe, and what's the Lattice.
Okay. And is there enough pain, discomfort, unhappiness that this is so that's the first part of that question, like, how do you know people want this?
Yep.
The first part is, what are they doing now to solve the problem, and or what evidence do you have that they even care enough to solve the problem? This is
Mm-hmm.
the issue Derek Reimer ran into with Level, is that people were interested, the manifesto appealed to them, and the Headlamp manifesto is going to appeal to anybody that's that has their, it's like, do you want your employees to be more engaged? Yes.
Yes.
Do you want them to be healthier and lead healthier lives? Yes, of course I want that. But do your actions match up with that desire? And do they match up at a level that is going to drive enough traffic and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, we know a little bit about know your team, in the sense that I think it's still a tiny company and product. For a while, I think, they were making $180,000 a year or $300,000 a year, or I can't remember what it was, but the numbers were relatively low. And that worries me a little bit, because that's got the firepower of
Yeah.
the 37 Signals audience.
Yep.
And people tell me all the time, like, it must be so easy for you, Justin, you have an audience. And I'm like, there's products all the time that have all of the biggest personal audiences in the world that can't become lucrative.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
I'm a little bit concerned about that, but maybe you're hitting this at the right time too. So there's so many examples of this, like community software, like Ning. I don't know if anyone
Yeah.
remembers
Oh
Ning.
my gosh. Yeah.
Like, Ning was there. They had it. They
Yeah.
had it in the pocket. And now, they died. And now there's this new wave of forum and community software. And, who knows if it's lucrative enough yet. But we do
Mm-hmm.
know that timing matters.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you get a sense of how unhappy folks are with their current solution?
In everyone that I've interviewed in terms of being a customer is definitely uh, down market of what I've been describing as the established side of the industry.
Okay.
So like definitely these smaller companies.
What do you mean
And
down market? Down market as in, you mean like there was this market you were targeting before, which was enterprise, but now
yeah,
you've got,
huge accounts. And now
okay,
down market of that is, open like a good SaaS offering. And
gotcha. Yep.
so, oh man, what's the name of I had a great conversation with this woman a couple weeks ago. um, and they do all of their stuff internally. They even built something internally to do
Mm-hmm.
this. So pain was great enough that they built an internal product.
Yep.
Um, but even in that, it wasn't like, oh, and man, yeah, Brian, we got to get this solved right now.
Hmm.
It was like a known it's a known issue. It's a known problem. The
Yep.
upsides of it are evident, but also in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And, people don't respond to that as quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it kind of has me thinking, Justin, like maybe I have like accurately identified that this is a recurring and regular issue,
Mm-hmm.
and a market exists. Conferences exist for this thing, but
Mm-hmm.
they exist at the 500 employee level, 1,000, 10,000 employee level.
Yeah.
And the way you described in a Twitter thread a few weeks ago about what you want as a bootstrapper is a slow moving incumbent.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
am not in the wake of a slow moving incumbent way down here.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a absolute prerequisite.
Yeah.
Um, it's like sometimes it's nice to have because, for example, in the case of forum software, let's call it, if we're in forums, the second wave of forums, well, who cleared the way? The first way, it was Discourse. They came in, they cleared the way. They said, here's a new paradigm for forums, and we're going to connect it to this. We're going to do this. It actually, this is a bad example because forums are already a category in people's minds. Um, let me find a better example. A better example might be, uh, all the early membership software plugins, right? So people, at first, that wasn't even a category, right? It was like you either build that custom
Hmm.
or you don't have membership software. And gradually that category was defined. And as Greg Kogan says, categories aren't like these magical, anointed things. They're just words that we've coalesced around to describe something that a certain sector buys all the time. So I buy CRM software, I buy podcast hosting,
Yep.
I buy membership software. And so sometimes it's helpful to have an incumbent who comes in, like Salesforce, and says, hey, we are doing however they describe themselves, sales CRM, and this is the category, and it's on the web, so we can even say it's SaaS sales CRM. And at first, people are like, "What's SaaS? I don't get it," And in the early days of SaaS, every SaaS used to have a page about like security and data, like that we would
Yeah.
have to show people, like,
Yeah.
listen, your data is actually safer with us than it is sitting on a
In
hard
your
drive in your,
closet.
yeah.
Yeah.
But people never talk about that anymore because it's established, right? Some big incumbents came in and cleared the way. They broke trail. And sometimes for bootstrappers, that's helpful to have, somebody who's big and well funded, either through an IPO or through venture funding, go in and spend all that money
Yep.
educating the public, creating, trying out different categories, finding one that works, and then proving that the model exists. Like uh, is it is
DocuSign?
it DocuSign? Yes. So, I mean, they came in, and there was all these all these competitors at the beginning. They had to spend massive amounts of money getting customers. But,
Yeah.
by the time that Ruben Gamez shows up with DocSketch, DocuSign has, I don't know, like millions and millions of customers, real estate agents, people that use this all the time now. They've created the category. And for Ruben to come in and shave off some of that market is, it would be a lot easier than if he had to educate people from the ground up.
Right. Right. I think, I mean, the thing in that conversation, that came up for me, I mean, it sounds like you're describing Clayton Christensen's theory of disruptive innovation, that, um, over time the market matures, the leaders overbuild, overcomplicated, because they are doing what they're supposed to do, responding to customer requests, making,
Mm-hmm.
gradual iterations and improvements that, given enough time, are no longer improvements, they're complexities.
Yeah.
And
Or
so,
just, but it can even be, I think it's sometimes not even as complicated as that, or it's just like, this software looks old.
yeah, sure.
Hey, Janet, can you find us some software that looks better, that has a better UI, that
Yeah.
is a little bit fresher?
Yes.
Um, that was, I think the new crop of forum software, that's their advantage, is that discourse just feels kind of old and crusty.
Hmm.
And before that, PHP BB felt old and crusty, right? And now it's like, let's give this a nice fresh coat of paint. Let's have a
Yeah.
few new ideas here. So
Yeah.
it doesn't always even have to be, you know, um, conform to the innovator's dilemma. I think sometimes it's just like, give me, like, Slack was basically a hip chat, but more fun.
Hmm.
It wasn't like a huge innovation. It was just a fresh coat of paint, a few new ideas, but the basic premise was already there. If I was HipChat, I'd be pissed, honestly,
Totally. Yeah.
because it was
Yeah.
like, what did we do wrong? Product was solid.
Hmm.
It worked. It was reliable. It was fast.
Was better than
And
Skype.
yeah, and it's just like Slack comes along and just says, well, we've got emojis and
Yeah.
GIFs, and that was kind of it. Like, the reason teams switched is because, I mean, this is a generalization, but a lot of teams, I was on a team that switched, and
So was
honestly,
I.
we were on the rallying cry was from the employees was, this just feels more fun.
Hmm.
We want to have more fun at work. That was it.
Yep. Yeah. No, we were on our startup was on HipChat, and then Slack came along and it was the hot thing, and the designers were pushing for it. And it was like,
Hmm.
I mean, we
And
can already do all
the
this.
timing was right too,
Mhm.
because at the time, design first startups was a really big thing.
Yes. Yep.
And so I think there was pressure on a lot of software companies and dev shops to be like, oh, let's be thinking design first. And we need
Hmm.
to use beautifully designed products. Uh, and so all of that kind of played into it. This is why I think the shape of market demand is so hard to pin down, and it changes all the time.
Hmm.
And so the idea that you and I as individual bootstrappers could influence it to any great degree is the part that I am kind of fighting for,
Allergic to.
right?
Yeah.
I'm people on Twitter like to remind me every day that no, it's possible. And it is possible for us to have a certain amount of influence. And certainly the bigger the audience and the bigger community, I mean, QAnon is a great example. Given enough, a big enough community, you can create waves for sure. But it's very difficult to do, very unlikely that any of us have that kind of power.
Totally.
And again, like, even for folks with considerably more influence than you and I, like 37 Signals, they're not they still need to be riding an existing wave.
Yeah.
And um, and these things change over time. So
Yeah.
initial traction for Slack, I think, was based on this kind of like, in the moment, at the moment, we were in this design first startups phase. Everyone wanted to use beautifully designed products. They wanted some of that to rub off on them. And it was fun. And so that same strategy might not work now if you wanted to launch a chat app now. And yeah, so
I think
sorry,
also,
I've lost the thread a little bit.
well, the instances of bootstrapped businesses, having that level of impact, that's as much of an outlier as the unicorn is in the venture backed world. And so if we're in if as bootstrappers, it's pretty fashionable to, take shots at the unicorn model, and it's ridiculous. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Well, it feels like the corollary over here is I'm going to bootstrap a category creating business. No, you're not. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, maybe some of those things have happened before, but they are so exceptional that it proves the rule. You
yes.
want to find treads to follow along and find your traction.
Yeah, I think, and I do think the exception for this, and I'm going to bring this up because Tyler Tringus has been like on my case for this. So I want to at least explore the other side, which is there are occasions where in some corner alley of the world, a bootstrapper will notice some demonstrated effort and we'll say, "Oh, that's weird. There's no category for this. This is like I don't know, like end roll credits that are a SaaS." So it's kind of like it's not really a category. There's categories of like After Effects and titling software in that industry, but no one's really doing it like that. Arvid and Danielle with
Yep.
Feedback Panda, there's always been a category for that, but for that audience of you know English teachers teaching English to Chinese students, this was in some ways a new thing that they were creating. And the important piece is that there was some demonstrated effort there, and it was niche enough that they
Mm-hmm.
didn't really need to have a category because it was like as long as they could reliably find customers and as long as people talked to each other about it, that was enough. So I think there's exceptions in the sense that, yeah, sometimes you'll happen upon a little niche that has never, um, hasn't really been exposed to the broader world yet. And you'll have this insight of, oh yeah, I could build something for them. There's disadvantages to that too. Like they often grow slower and they often have a ceiling, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we could back up just a second.
Yeah.
What's your goal for Headlamp? What are you trying to get out of it?
Um, well, I mean, freedom.
Good
um,
answer.
so yeah, I mean, I am not creatively fulfilled doing client work. And
Mm-hmm.
so my first goal is to be creatively fulfilled at work.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I do, I want it to be. And so it needs to be something that I can get excited about working on.
Mm-hmm.
And this topic of happiness at work, I've been interested in for like 15 years now. We spend so much
Mm-hmm.
time at work. It's important to me that
Yeah.
I and other people feel like, yeah, I'm doing something good.
Mm-hmm.
So needs to be aligned there. This is, but I mean, most importantly, that I would have the flexibility and the freedom to continue to work for myself while also providing for, my family that's
Yeah.
upstairs and counting on me to pull it off.
So if you don't mind sharing, like what's the
Yeah.
minimum bar of revenue? Like what annual recurring revenue figure do you want to hit to be like, okay, this is kind of my floor, and anything above this is
Mm.
great. Maybe
Uh,
not like ramen profitable. Like ramen is still
no,
like
like
you're still, but like what's like a comfortable annual recurring revenue number, considering that maybe your take home would be 70 or 80% of it.
Like for the foreseeable future, or for me to quit doing client work and just go all in?
Yeah, I think to quit doing client work
Yeah.
and just to have a floor, like where do you kind of need to start?
D-
Because
Go ahead.
it's going to determine, this is like that's the piece, right? It's like, um if there's a handful of companies that are 25 to 100 employees, but they're super hard to get to, and it's
Hmm.
pretty slow going. Like, another thing I'm thinking, just a sidebar here, sorry. I've been thinking about this thing of like the long, slow SaaS ramp of death. Like,
Yeah.
we
Yes.
just accept that. And to be
Yeah.
honest, like, Transistor's ramp wasn't that slow. It felt slow for the first 6 months. And then, um, you know, but a year after we launched publicly, we were both working full time for it,
Yep.
for Transistor. Felt, in retrospect, I'm like, man, that's fast.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like that happened quick. And also, in retrospect, I mean, if anyone goes back and listens to those episodes of our show, I was like, well, and John too, we were like fucking stressed out for that first 2 years. And so it's like, how long can you live in that
Because y'all were,
existential?
yeah, well, y'all were mapping it out to be like, okay, maybe 5 years from now we'll be
Yeah.
able to live on this. But
And
your
to be fair,
percentage growth just, percentages compound.
yeah, and maybe it was good to still have those low expectations. But I mean, Jason Cohen said, if it takes that long, I would not pursue it.
Kill the business. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think we need to have that narrative a little bit more. And especially if you have a family, you're going to need to hit, I'm guessing it's going to be at least 200,000 or 150,000
Yeah.
a
Yep.
year in revenue.
Yep.
And so, 150,000 in revenues, that's 12,500 in MRR a month. And if the product is $49, that's 255 customers. And that's doable.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
right now, like, do you have any customers yet?
I had one and they churned out.
And they turned out okay. So this is what you need to get a sense for, is like,
Hmm.
okay, here we go. Like, I've got one this month, and then maybe I'll have 3 the next month, and
Right.
then 5 the next month, and then 10 the next month, and then 15 the next month. Even that's a pretty healthy growth rate, 20, 25. It's like, even like just me coming up with pretend numbers here in my calculator, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. After 8 months, you might be at 35 people. And that's, $1,700 a month. So I think that's this is what, when we're weighing how badly do people want this and how do you know, that's
Hmm.
what you want to know. Like,
Yeah.
what is this? And I'm not sure if you've done enough experiments to know for sure. Like, I don't know how complicated things are, but if I was you and it wasn't too complicated, I think I would release the red, yellow, green check-in system and start charging for it right away, and like allow people to sign up for it publicly, do a push on it,
Hmm.
maybe make it lower priced, but just see how hard is that? Because that, of everything you've mentioned, that seems to have the most traction.
Yep.
It's also like the one thing, like, that I typically don't like employee engagement ideas, because I've I've never worked for enterprise, so I haven't seen it there, but I've seen multiple people over my career try to start these things, usually around scheduling one-on-ones. And those companies just don't grow. They never hit escape velocity.
Hmm.
It's just not enough of a problem. And but when you said that check-in thing, my immediate thought was actually, Oh, I would use that with John, my co-founder. And it's hard convincing John to pay for anything, but I would try to convince him to pay for it, because right now for him and I, our biggest risk is that either of us will not be doing good. And there's
Mm-hmm.
a couple different vectors to that, like just how are you doing in your life? Like, is there stuff going on in your personal life that's, shitty?
Mm-hmm.
It's good for us to know that. Is there stuff going on in our interpersonal relationship that's bugging you?
Yeah.
Are you yellow
Yep.
about us? Well, I need to know that, right? And what are you yellow about? And I know Ben Ornstein does a version of this with
Mm-hmm.
his co-founders,
Yep.
where they have, I like it when, I wish, you know,
Some
and
variation there.
yeah, that red, yellow, green check-ins, and I could also see us using it for our contractors too, in the sense of, especially during COVID, and like we're probably not ready to hire anyone full time right now, but if a contractor was checking in with me and was consistently yellow, and I dug into it, I'm coming up with scenarios in my head. I dug into it, and they said, and I've done this, I've reached out to contractors and said, hey, just let me know if financially or anything, if COVID or the lockdown or you're losing clients or whatever is stressing you out, just let me know and I'll see what I can do. But having a pulse of that, of like, maybe continual yellows, and someone saying, well, I'm really not liking my day job, and I'm thinking about doing something else, and I'm working for you guys as a contractor. If I see a string of those, I can start to think, oh, wow, well,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I should think about trying to hire this person in 6 months or something.
So how are you currently doing that? Just over email, or do you guys have a Slack channel with your
Just in
contractors?
Slack. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're in our regular Slack. John and I have a channel called Daily Check-In. Oh, I got two things right now. And Daily Check-In is mostly where we just talk about stuff we don't want everyone else to read,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also where we check in with each other and, hey, how's it going?
Mm-hmm.
A little wave in the morning. It's where we
Have
both tell each
you
other that we've had crappy sleeps.
have you tried installing like a bot, or just putting a bot in
No,
there to ask you this?
no, um, no, we haven't. And so that's interesting, because I haven't actually demonstrated any effort yet, except that I tried. Um, I did this on Twitter too, because I heard you
Yeah,
talking about it. I was like, oh, I'm just going to try a big giant experiment here,
saw
and
that thread.
ask people how they're doing. Red, yellow, green, and that was interesting, actually. And I've done that in our transistor Slack as well. So yeah, I think I've dipped our toes in this,
Mm-hmm.
and we've tried doing the Ben Ornstein method, um, but we just couldn't get it off the ground.
Yeah.
We tried including it as questions at the end of our phone call, like after we've done recording the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but it hasn't worked for us yet. It feels like it's one of those areas I wouldn't mind having some rails, like, yeah, just like do this and help us figure out how healthy, in our case, uh, each of us are. And then if we did get employees, we would carry that in there. So anyway, that I don't,
Okay.
we're probably not a good market, but I'm just talking out loud about
Yeah.
how that seemed to resonate and would be worth testing.
Yeah, it would definitely be worth testing. I think the thing that's come out of this conversation that I am really feeling challenged on and wanting to test is maybe this realization of, I think, or I thought that I was building a super simple, straightforward tool that will outdo the overcomplicated competitors.
Mm-hmm.
But those competitors is not where I'm competing. And so I'm thinking like, I've been saying 25 to 100. I need to start thinking 500 to 1,000.
Mm.
I need to go up so that I do look like the cool, straightforward, simple, innovative newcomer. I don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily look like that to other, startups who are themselves building innovative tools. So
Yeah.
maybe I need to go up. What is your gut
Yeah. I mean,
reaction?
that's a great, even look at what I was trying to do. I was like trying to help you carve out a niche on the low end of the market. I'm like, and maybe that's still a good way to go because there is some interest there, but there's not, what you're missing there is demonstrated demand.
Yeah.
But you have experience that were, and connections and a network in that other level. And generally, I think that's the better way to go, is to go, if, because it's such a risk what we're doing. You're spending months of your life building something, writing content for something with no pay, hoping that it's going to give you some sort of return. And I think a lot of my entrepreneurial life, I was looking for something that would just give me enough, like, oh, okay, that's like,
Yeah.
if I can just make this work, um, and work really hard, and, it, and inevitably, I think that's hard to do. It's just going to lead to, you're just always rebooting and rebooting and
Hmm.
rebooting.
Hmm.
And, or you're trying to build something that is just taking too long, or just never, doesn't have the floor that you're looking for, like doesn't get you to the point. But now you have another problem, which is you have a bunch of people paying and you're making $2,500 in MRR. And the it's the return on investment I think bootstrappers need to consider more.
Hmm.
And this is like the age old question, like, when do you fold? And I think we need to think more about when we fold. um so yeah, if there's, so when you're placing bets and you've already been in an industry and you've already had experience selling a product, and the ins and outs, and you have connections, and you even have, like, I like, one thing about Transistor that was nice is I had existing friends I could go to and say, hey, you're already hosting a
Yep.
podcast, why don't you just switch it to
Just,
us?
yep.
And uh and if you can't convince your friends to switch, it's like, how am I going to convince anyone else?
Convince total strangers. Yeah.
Yeah, so that might be something to think about, is um maybe you need to go up market, but then you've got to accept everything that means
Yes.
for
Right.
you personally. And again, all of these things are like, which arena do you want to fight in? Like, you get to choose which. And
Hmm.
if I have the choice between competing in gymnastics or snowboarding, I'm going to choose snowboarding because
Yeah.
I just have no experience in gymnastics. It's going to be a much harder uh, arena for me to compete in. But at the same time, I know enough about competitive snowboarding that, like, I've been in that sport forever. But if you ask me, like, okay, now this is, I'm creating an analog to you going upstream and going to the enterprise. If you said, Justin, you've got to compete at an Olympic level, I'm like, okay, well, I
I'm out.
can't. I
Yeah.
like, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure I could, like, work really hard and get better, but for me to reach
Mm.
that, it's just, I know that's not me. So I think those are some of the dynamics you want to consider. And uh yeah, the there's pros and cons, right? To all of that. You have to feel that out. Luckily, you have some experience. So you know what it's like to go into those kind of sales
Yep.
negotiations. You
Yep.
know how long it might take. Um the benefit, maybe what you want to do is get someone to sign on right now and pay you one of those beefy contracts, which is
Right.
like,
Yep.
hey, I know you're paying this right now, and I know you don't like it. And if you guys prepay for a year, then you can use Headlamp, and that will give you some runway.
Totally.
So there's ways for you to put a line in the sand
Mm-hmm.
and figure out, am I going to keep going on this, or is it time to, maybe
Call it.
call it and look for something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right. Well, I want to take up any more of your time.
Oh
Really
man,
enjoyed the.
I thought we
I
were just
enjoyed the
getting going. I,
well,
I I will say, like, I know this is so hard when you're in it,
mhm.
but like if I was going to, I would bet on you as a founder long term for sure, because I think you've got what it takes to keep trying things. You're good at networking. You're good at reaching out to people. You're good, and people like you get to success because in the midst of doing things and trying things, stuff happens and they notice things, and eventually something reveals itself. And like right before Transistor, I was trying to market Tiny Marketing Wins, this online course and membership
Mhm.
thing, and it was a disaster. Like, but it was the best option I had at the time, and it was paying enough of my bills that it was worth. Like, it was a complete slog. It was not a good business, but it was paying enough of the bills and doing enough that it was okay while I was looking for my next move. And once my next move revealed itself, I was all in. Like, I just put all my
Yeah.
chips. I was just like, yep, I'm in. And so I think for you personally, it might still be worth it to experiment with this a little bit. In the absence of other options, there's nothing wrong with going, okay, well, I'm going to keep pushing this down the road and seeing where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm going to, you know what, maybe I'll keep developing that red, yellow, green check-in thing and see how that works. Like, there's just things you can do while you're in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And the key is, when, it's like if you're paddling on a river, when you hit the good momentum, right? It's like you're kind of going along slowly, and all of a sudden this current just picks you up and you're like, whoa, we are cooking now. And maybe you had just been portaging for 20 kilometers. You know what it feels like to get caught up in a good current. And part of the key, I think, for entrepreneurs is to just, you got to be out there with your canoe or you're never going to
Yeah.
find it.
Mm-hmm.
And most people who are out there with their canoe eventually find some good water. It just takes, it takes some time.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words. And I'm so glad to have gotten. I quit counting, but maybe like a dozen Justin Jackson metaphors along the parables along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully they're helpful.
They are.
In the
No, it's
sense,
good. It's
in
good.
the sense, like, I guess anyone who's never paddled on a river, it's a lot harder. Like, if
Well,
all you've ever done is paddle on lakes, I don't have anything for you. But if you've ever paddled on a river,
yeah, I feel like portaging for 20 kilometers was a pretty Canadian thing to say. So is that, yeah.
Is that not a word in the States?
I have always read it as portaging, but
That's hilarious. I
but
wonder how.
you also say JavaScript. So
Yeah, and I mean, in Canada, even there's Canadians that go like, Justin, you don't talk right here either. So, I would say how do you guys say it? I say portage.
Well, I say
Portage.
portage. I mean, but I'm not a
Oh.
canoeer. I mean, I've only like
Wow.
when I
How does
read it.
how does Google say it? Oh, Google
Let's
says portage.
okay.
What the heck? Let's solve this right now.
Let's solve it.
You might have to put a
It
clip.
is. No.
You might have to put a clip in.
Oh yeah,
later.
I'll record it and drop it in here, and
Let's see
we'll
what
let
it
people
is.
vote.
Portage. Portage. Portage.
I think
Put
we
it
should
in
do a
and post.
poll. I think it's
Okay.
portaging. What did I say? Now I can't even.
You said portage.
Portage, because to me it's French, portage.
Yep.
So I'm just like slightly anglicizing it. So
No,
yeah,
you make a strong case. I'm not saying that you don't.
no wonder nobody understands me. Half the time people are like, "What is he
What?
saying? Like, what is this?" Great. It was great to be with you, Brian. Thanks.
Oh man, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And hope to talk again sometime soon.